Hello gamers. So via information that came to me in a dream, we now know a lot of information about Odette's kit, and I thought I would go over it because if you didn't watch my Stejnaya preview video where I did a tier list, I put Odette pretty high because I just think her presentation of being this ballerina assassin is really cool. So she is one of the more anticipated characters for me personally. However, before we talk about Odette's kit, I want to talk quickly about the new sets that are coming out and also the new stellar-swirl reaction. So we're going to have a stellar-swirl DPS set. 2-piece is 18% attack, and the 4-piece is 16% crit rate with 40% stellar-swirl damage. Obviously, it's when you trigger stellar-swirl, blah, 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 But effectively, it's 100% uptime. And same for the stellar conduct support set. 2-piece is attack 18%, 4-piece is 12% attack and 50% stellar reaction damage bonus. I didn't specify whether it was stellar conduct or stellar swirl because I think it's both combined. You get 50% stellar conduct damage bonus and stellar swirl damage bonus. So just an absolutely insane set, honestly. And now let's talk about the stellar swirl reaction. So when you have one of these new characters that can trigger stellar swirl, Animo plus Cryo creates a wind cluster. And we have no idea how this looks or anything yet, but I think when the wind cluster is created, it immediately deals a burst of animo damage that can crit. And when the wind cluster explodes, I think just over time it'll eventually explode, it will deal AoE cryo damage and it can crit. These wind clusters deal more damage and a larger AoE as you trigger more stellar swirl reactions. So as you keep triggering more reactions, the wind cluster, I guess, gets bigger or gets stronger, something like that, and it will explode prematurely once you've triggered enough stellar swirl reactions. And we don't know the potency of this reaction. We don't know how strong it is, obviously, but this is just how it functions. This was the most interesting thing. After the wind cluster explodes, nearby characters can perform a high jump briefly. So sort of encouraging some plunge characters maybe to return. Who knows? Could be good for maybe Xiao, could be good for Veressa. I don't know, but very interesting reaction nonetheless. Now we can talk about Odette. Odette is a cryo off-field DPS, mainly off-field DPS. He is a sword wielder. Her kit mentions a lot of stellar conduct and also stellar swirl, so she will work in both team archetypes. She provides some team-wide buffs, and I find her to be quite similar to fischl or Yai, or really any character that's sort of in this sub-DPS category but also has supportive capabilities, so characters like Linnea, Enefa, Columbina even, right? It's very similar to that vein. So how does she work? She is this sort of ballerina assassin character. You use your skill, you summon a solo reflection, which is a dancing reflection that does AoE cryo damage periodically. I kind of have high hopes for the animations of this because if it's going to be summoning a sort of projection thing similar to how Nicole does it, that'll be pretty cool, and it'll be maybe dancing around. Maybe be similar to something like Nefer, her shades, right? When she does her charge attacks. Interested to see how that ends up turning out. And when the reflection is nearby, she can press her skill again. In a normal rotation, you probably swap to her. You press your skill and then you press it again. You do this duet move or whatever. And it does mostly, she does in general, mostly just cryo damage, AoE cryo damage. But she does have occasional stellar conduct and stellar swirl hits in her kit. So specifically at the end of a duet, you do a stellar conduct or stellar swirl hit. Her burst does multiple instances of cryo damage and then resummons the reflection, very similar to fischl, where you can use fischl's burst. It does some damage, but then it also resummons Oz, so very similar to that. And the burst gives stellar reaction damage bonus, but it only gives it to Odette, so probably depending on the team and depending on how strong Odette ends up being, you might just skip out on using this burst entirely. It's really sort of up in the air right now. And her passives are pretty important, and this is where the team-wide buffs come in. So while a summon is on field, so this is, I don't know why I wrote that specifically, when her reflection is on field, she gains 4 stacks of brilliance, and these increase stellar reaction damage. I didn't put any numbers for that specifically, but it should be about like 60% in total. But again, this is all subject to change. It's very early on, so take all of the numbers with a grain of salt. However, when Odette is off field, these stacks are actually transferred to the rest of the team. So you're going to be giving this 60% damage bonus to everyone else on the team. I think excluding Odette. So this is sort of encouraging Odette being an off-field character. You also get an increase to your stellar reaction damage for every 100 attack of 1000, increases your original damage up to 30%, which is different to something like 30% stellar reaction damage bonus. So that is an important distinction to make. Also have essentially an unconditional 14% stellar reaction damage bonus, which is very similar to the passive of the non-cry characters. If you remember, on basically every Luna character, they all have this passive where it says, you know, every point of EM or attack increases damage up to a maximum of 14%, right? It's very similar to that, but it's just for stellar reaction damage. And lastly, what we do not know. We do not know currently how often the skill hits, and this is important because this will ultimately determine her value, because he is mainly a sub DPS, which means her value is mostly going to come from how much damage she's actually doing. She does have supportive capabilities through giving the stellar conduct damage bonus to everyone else on the team. We really just have to know how much damage she's going to do, and this is going to change a lot, right? As we've all seen from previous betas and whatnot, the amount of damage that characters do changes a ton usually. So I would at this point take everything with a grain of salt until Odette actually releases. But yeah, ultimately just kind of like a fischl Yai, but instead does cryo damage. She's going to work on stellar conduct and stellar-swirl teams. I'm very interested to see her animations, since she is a ballerina character, and a lot of her kit description is talking about like dancing and like waltz and stuff like that. I just wanted to make this video about Odette. I'm just pretty excited for this character. I think she just looks cool as hell. There's another character I really want to talk about, which is Alyosha. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a video on him just yet. I might wait a little bit longer, but very first impressions, he seems like he's only going to be good at C6 right now. But again, it's very early and a lot of stuff is still subject to change. But yeah, I will see you guys around. Bye bye.
"今にはなくて昔は